In this session, we're looking at tapping into the source of the ancient and miraculous energy. And to do that, we have to understand, or try to grasp, the distinction between the energy of matter and the energy of spirit, or non-matter, consciousness. Because these are different energies. Both of them are very, very subtle. And it's not very easy to distinguish them through sense perception. And we talked earlier about perceiving directly through the mind. And the mind is not part of the body, but it is called a faculty of the soul. Your capacity for sense perception depends on your brain and your sense organs. But ultimately, whatever you perceive it in your mind. Because the mind is the word for that instrument that's the interface between the brain and the soul, as far as perception is concerned. So if you just experiment for a moment and just look out through your eyes, whatever is in front of you, and normally you will think, you will experience that whatever is in front of you is outside your body, and it's there, and you are perceiving it there. But in reality, the act of perception is going on in here. So there are certain things that, almost like games, that people understand that visual perception can be made to look different from what it is, like with parallel lines or non-parallel lines and other types of things like this. You've seen all that. But generally speaking, people assume that you're perceiving something where it is, out there. But you can also consider with just as much validity that your eyes will show you what's in front of you, but it's registered inside. So you can experience on the screen the sense of distance and space, just as well as if you're seeing a big distance and space. Though you know this one is on the screen, that one is in so-called reality. So this is how we normally work with visual perception, auditory perception. Sense of smell is much more subtle. A lot of people don't have a very good sense of smell, especially after COVID. Many people lost their sense of smell, but okay. Taste, your tongue can register 4 different tastes, but yet you taste all these different things because of your sense of smell, not because of your sense of taste. And touch, temperature, texture. But it's all registered in your mind. And you like something or you don't like something because of you, not because of it. You say something is smooth So you like smooth. If it's rough, you might say, if it's rough it might hurt me, so it's not so pleasant. So the pleasure-pain principle is almost like a convention to do with how we perceive through sense perception and how we interpret those perceptions among each other. So we have an agreement that color and form and nice or nasty, or taste in architecture, taste in fashion, taste in music, taste in all of these things as something that is very much cultural. And culture is something that you learn as a child growing up. And so it's quite difficult for an individual to perceive something independently of these different filters, especially the filter of culture. And then a person is identified by the culture and by biological matters as being a male or a female, as being whatever the race is, as being whatever the culture is, as being the nationality. All of these things are conventions that we go along with because it's tradition, it's culture, it's always been like that. Literature shows that it's like that. Religion supports that. And so you say, this is reality. And in spirituality, we start to look at things in a different way. And the reason we do this is to be able to make the effort to understand the difference between what is material and what is not material. Like, for example, space. There's nothing there. It's called a vacuum, but it's also called ether, which is one of the elements of matter. The proportions of the elements of matter on the planet Earth are the same as the proportions of those elements in a human body. Like the Earth has 70% water. Your body is 70% water. You may be dehydrated, it might go down a bit, but overall it's 70% water. So that your body is warm mud. And then you say, that's me, because of the face and other attributes of identification that we are culturally brought up with. And when you have an identification document, the tradition or the method is that if you do not have a birth certificate, you can be proved not to exist. And if you use a name that is not your birth name, you can be considered a liar, this sort of thing, because of the conventions, not because of reality. You can call yourself whatever you want. It says you shouldn't be this, you have to be that. The culture. And we are looking at these things because the energy of matter is very, very subtle, the actual energy of matter. And it's very difficult for a human being to perceive the energy of matter, just as the energy of it. Very difficult. was possible. And then the energy of consciousness, in terms of sense perception, is indistinguishable from the energy of matter. Cannot be distinguished. The only way you can distinguish it is philosophically. That's the way it is. And earlier I mentioned about the mind being able to perceive vibrations, see, which are not material. They are carried in the dimension of matter, but they are not matter itself. Like love, you see, peace. You cannot actually perceive these things directly. You can have a loving person, and you will say this is a loving person on the basis of behaviors and so on. But to perceive love itself is very subtle, can be done through the mind, because love is an element of the spirit. It's not an element of matter. Element of matter are water, air, earth, fire, and ether. There is a big long table of elements, but these are the only ones that are stable. All the others are unstable. And so this is why they're called the 5 elements of matter. And in comparison, in contrast with that, the elements of the spirit would be purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. And it's quite difficult to perceive those just by themselves as energies or as attributes of the energy of spirit. But yet, when you go into the depth of meditation and spirituality, because what you want is to know and to perceive and to make contact with your essential purity, you need this. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing. It's just, what do you call it? Subjective. And so people have a belief that if something is objective, it's real. And if it's subjective, it's not. This is a convention. Because it is not possible for you to perceive objective reality objectively. You can only do this subjectively, because it's based on sense perception. And sense perception is by definition subjective. So we have a convention that objective reality is not subjective and spiritual reality is subjective, but there's just a convention. Both of them are equally only able to be perceived by the mind, which is non-objective. The only objective thing, I think, would be something like mathematics, which is conceptual. You see? So, but what we want to do is to feel this essence of the self. And so I think one important thing for us to say to ourselves is that my perception, the way I perceive subjectively, is sufficient for me to trust. The problem I mentioned earlier is that sense perception is deceptive, and that is regarding objective reality. And when you go to the reality that is much more subtle, purity, peace, power, love, bliss, you have to be so much more fine-tuned to perceive it that we say this line between the grosser and the more subtle is the same as objective and subjective, even though all of it is subjective. There's a convention. It's okay. But for us to try to understand this ancient power, the source, I think it's important for us to say that I trust myself and my ability to recognize what's there sufficiently to say yes. Some people will say, I don't know. Some people will say, I know. Equally subjective. So it depends on the individual. It depends on the refinement of your powers of perception. So the first thing that we need to do is to work with the idea of perceiving the self, with the description of the self as a non-material being. We will say a being is not an object. An object is not a being. Your body is an object. And even if you say, this is me, it's not actually. We just as easily say, this is my body, or this is me. We also just as easily talk about my soul. We don't generally talk about me soul. But then what is a self? Don't know. But we can say the self is the one who perceives. And your body is only for some time, so we can say it's temporary. Yourself, though you cannot perceive it very easily, you can understand and accept or not accept, understand or not understand. But it is said the soul cannot be created or destroyed, just as matter also cannot be created or destroyed. But your body, made up lots of little cells and so on, which keep reproducing and regenerating themselves and so on, we can understand the human body because we have studied the biology and all of this. But it's very difficult to use the same mechanism, the same methods for studying the self, because the self is not material. But still, we want to be able to perceive the self. So information about a self cannot be gathered by observation. Information about the self can only be known to a self that doesn't degenerate. And so, in spiritual terms, it will be said that that self knows what these cells want to know. So the source of this power is conscious source, whereas the source of the power of matter is not conscious. But yet people talk about the spirit of the elements of matter. You may have heard this. Spirit in the sense of volatility, spirit in the sense of it appears to have attributes of consciousness, even though it doesn't. Like, we will say, this tree is alive, but it's not conscious. Well, you will go and hug a tree, you are conscious. The tree will respond positively because matter that's alive but not conscious is affected by spirit that's conscious, because the combination of matter and spirit we call visible life. But when you separate matter and spirit, which can't be done other than in your intellect, then you can understand that there is a difference between the perceiver and what is perceived. So, a tree, a flower, a plant responds to the energy of spirit without being conscious. Whereas one who is conscious, that means a human being, animal, bird, reptile, whatever, has different levels of consciousness. Human being being the highest. And among human beings, some more high, some less high. It is like that. So, for us to grasp this energy that we want to tap into, it's better if we can understand as much as possible to be able to grasp it better, because there are days where you feel connected and other days where you feel not connected. Yeah? And so that is also subjective. And it also is there to let you know that you can be connected without feeling connected. And you can feel connected without being connected. And this is a wonder. But, religious people grapple with this. As religious people, they talk about faith. And they say, well, if you have strong faith, then you will feel it. Then you get people who have strong faith and don't feel it, and then they feel like they are being punished or something like this because they can't make contact. So we need to be able to go beyond that feeling part of it, because we tend to give too much credibility to feeling. We say, if I can feel it, it's there. If I can't feel it, it's not there. But that is not as reliable as people believe. In relationships, it's all about, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Well, I can't feel it, but I love you. Well, how do I know I love you? Well, you just have to have faith that I love you. Oh, but you... So we want to get something to make us feel something in order for us to believe that it's real, but this is deceptive. So in spirituality, it's helpful to be aware that we cannot really give 100% credibility to good days and bad days. And this is why mathematics is quite nice, in my opinion, because 2 + 2 is 4 in the daytime, in the nighttime, in a bad day, good day, when you're in pleasure, when you're in displeasure. It doesn't have anything really to do with your moods. And so we will say it's factual. And anything to do with moods, again we use this word subjective. And so we're creating conventionally a distinction between subjective and objective, which is not reliable outside of quite a gross range. You know. Another example for this is when you light an incense stick, you can smell it for a while and then you can't. You can light 10 or 20 or 30 or 50. You can smell it for a while and then you can't. And sense perception is like that. You fall in love with someone, you feel it for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 weeks, 5 years, and then you can't. Because these feelings let us know something long enough for us to be able to take action. But they don't remain that intense endlessly, because it's not necessary, even if it's desirable. And so we have to understand that, we have to know that. And if you don't feel things in terms of peak experiences, then you can't have peak experiences. And if you don't have peak experiences, you're not comfortable. But you cannot keep everything at peak, because then you can't feel anything. And so the nature of it is you will feel it intensely for some time, and then it's like, did you get it? Okay, then you don't need to feel it because you got it. And then the same with spiritual practice. Some people believe that if you can't feel it, it's not there. And that's not a very good idea to have that belief, because it can't be substantiated. You feel it, okay, got it. You don't feel it anymore, but I know it's there, like that. So knowing from this angle has more, is more reliable than feeling. And I say this because when you want to understand these very, very subtle things, it's better, in my opinion, to go by analysis than by perception. Even though you will say, well, I want to feel it. So yes, okay, you can feel it for a couple of seconds. And when you can't feel it anymore, it doesn't mean it's not there. That's my point. So when you go into silence, you will say to yourself, okay, I'm going to feel something. And you may, but mostly you won't. And some people, they say, well, if I can't feel anything, maybe I'm not doing it right. Or maybe it isn't there, like this. And so I'm saying these things to suggest that we need to understand it more than feel it, and to trust what we have understood, and to have faith in what we've understood, which is not the same as blind faith. Blind faith is when you have to suspend, what do they call it? Like suspend believability. Because if somebody tells you you have to believe in something that's not believable, then your analytical side of your consciousness will say, why should I? There's no basis for this. But you have to have faith. Okay, but I don't, so have a nice day. But to have faith that you yourself are a spiritual being operating through a material body is something you need to understand and substantiate that understanding. This is not a blind faith, because you can substantiate. The more information you have about the spirit, the mind, the understanding, the nature of consciousness, the more you can process the idea, the more your understanding of it is greater, deeper, wider, broader. And to tap into this energy, if we understand it to the best of our ability, then we can do what is necessary. You remember in the meditation that I was proposing to you before lunch, you stand between the pairs of opposites and you make a contact with something outside the world of material reality and you spin it. There you find stability. This is architectural, but this works because of the nature of the architecture. Similar to a pendulum, how it works. And the earth will turn, but the pendulum will stay in its own plane. So it means the more you can grasp that you are a spiritual being who is genderless, colorless, cultureless, raceless, the more you can extract yourself from the cultural conventions that tell you what your identity is. You see? Because the human way of looking at people is, when a baby is born, what is it? Never do they say, who is it? So you were told, this is an object. A being is an object. It's incorrect. A being is difficult to perceive. You can grasp the being as it is expressed through the object of the body, because you cannot physically perceive a being directly, only indirectly. Right? And so when you have a child and the child grows up, their personality is slowly revealed. And then you know that person through how they express themselves. Slowly, slowly, and you know a small percentage. Because the being has so many layers, deep layers inside. So in the same way, for us to be able to perceive that energy where there is not even the slightest physical medium through which you can perceive it indirectly, that's a problem. Right? But it's possible by thinking deeply. So meditation really means to think deeply about something in order to be able to perceive it without relying on sense perception. So the elements of the spirit, purity, peace, power, love, bliss. Not very many people have ever experienced bliss unless they're on some sort of drug. And that's not real. many people have experienced peace. So peace is the more tangible of these intangible elements. You experience peace in nature. You say peace because everything is in harmony, it's not in a disturbed state, though it can be. So when you experience those things, when you feel good inside yourself, when you've had a good massage or something like this, you will say, I'm experiencing peace. And so this is in the consciousness, this is what peace is like. And when you feel love, you can say, yeah, I feel love. So these two are quite easy to perceive. Stillness, you have peace, you have stillness, and you have quiet. You're still talking about a spiritual quality in sense perception terms, but it's close, you see, so you can get to it. The poets use metaphors to enable us to understand something that they've gone to and say it is like deep clear water, or it is like a newborn baby's smile. They use analogies and metaphors because the feeling of it comes through certain things. It's an indirect perception. And what we're trying to do in meditation is to make it as direct as possible, so that we can say to ourselves, yeah, I connected, I know, I felt. And the experience that you generally get in meditation, like good meditation, will last you 1 or maximum 2 seconds. But you got it. And then you want to hold it, but it's like a chime of a clock. It strikes once and there's a little resonance that lasts for a little while. And then you can remember it. And the next hour it chimes again. And you say, yeah, that's my clock. Because it will create a vibration that corresponds to something in you that is the spiritual part. You see? So it's an interface between the material and the spiritual that we can perceive. And that's just the way human beings are built. And when we do a spiritual practice, one of the things we do is to practice to separate from the body. You separate from the body. Normally when you separate from the body, this is called death. But it's also called sleep. But if you fall asleep in meditation, you will be said, missed it. So the idea is to understand that it's possible to disconnect from your sense organs, your sense perception, by disconnecting from the body, to be able to be more easily able to perceive what you can perceive only through the mind, which is these vibrations of purity, peace, bliss, love, and power. They're very, very subtle. When you disconnect by an act of will, disconnect from your body, it makes these more accessible. And when you're totally in your body, then you're limited by sense perception because you're bound by the body. you have heard people speak of nirvana. So nirvana is a dimension which is non-material. So when you leave your body, you go there. But when you leave your body, you are bound to matter, and you are also bound by karma. So you can't just leave and stay away, you will pulled back in. That's the nature of it. But in spiritual practice, you want to try to separate so that you can experience, even if only for a second or two, you can experience what it is like to be me, bodiless. Many people, they are very interested in near-death experiences, because in a near-death experience, you are ejected from your body. And then you say, that's my body down there, and I'm still here. There's two of us. And it feels like that. There's two of us. One is me, and one is it. And you get it, that I am not my body. And that makes you feel something or realize something. And what people don't much know about is that there is a soul, there is a body, and there is a shadow body. You know a ghost? There's a shadow body. So you have a shadow body, you have a material body, and then there is just the soul. So when you leave your body in a near-death experience, you go with your shadow body. And then you come back with the same shadow body into your normal body and say, I went, and I came back. So people speak about this when they are in coma, or the physical body is physically dead, and then they resuscitate. And all of these stories are there, and anecdotes. And because there are so many experiences like this in human experience, and people believe that, there is a difference between me and my body. And then they've seen ghosts. And so they say, I saw the ghost of my grandmother, came to visit me. You may have experienced this happens. And so people have these experiences, and they will interpret them according to their perception. And their perception may or may not tell them what's really going on, but they have faith in their perception, because it's real. What you perceive for you at that moment is real, you see. So that's perception. Then comes knowing, like spiritual information, which is more philosophical, more mathematical. So the size of a soul, the size of a soul, how big is a soul? It doesn't have a size, because it's non-material. So it is called a point. In mathematics, in geometry, there's no size of a point. But you cannot say the point doesn't exist. It exists, but in your mind. You can't have a physical point, but you can comprehend a point. You see, this is very important, because if you can comprehend a point, it means that you can work with the idea of a point. You can work with the idea that I am non-physical, and my form is a point, and I can exist without having to be physical. You can comprehend that. That's very easy to comprehend. And once you can grasp that, then you're able to cross over from material reality to non-material reality. So nirvana is a word to refer to the dimension outside space where non-material spirits can dwell. So it's a dimension. Like space is a dimension where physical things hang, like planets or stars or something like this. They're not hanging on strings, they're just there. And we can deal with that. In the same way, the spirit is in that dimension. That means you can understand, but you cannot perceive. You can understand there's a material dimension and non-material dimension. And the energy of the spirit is real. It's called the life force. And when it comes in a body, it makes that body alive. And when it goes out of that body is called dead. So the life and death is because of the presence or non-presence of this. And that's a very big energy, which is the energy of you, the self. This is something to meditate on, you see, because you hear it and you say, what is this? And then you have to think about it for 100 years. Because by thinking about it, it makes itself more known to you. You get insights. And as you continue to investigate it subjectively, and you get more insights, these insights make it more accessible to you, more real to you. And then you say, yes, I'm a spiritual being. I felt it, I know it, I comprehend it, I processed it, I know the analogies, I'm comfortable with this, and I can substantiate it to my own satisfaction. I mean, some people do, some people don't. To go from there to a further step, in this dimension of nirvana, there being a point of light which has sufficient energy to run the whole cosmos. That is what we want to go to. That's big time. And you say, that's practically inaccessible. It is practically inaccessible, but it's possible to contemplate on that to a point where you can get more and more by thinking about it. And the purpose of knowing this is so that you can make contact. Because if you can make contact, you can draw the energy into yourself. And that is the only source of energy for a soul, the only source. What do people do in relationships a lot of time is they want to take each other's energy. And they call that love. But it's actually cannibalism. In a way, because you might have felt this, I've got to get away from this person, they're eating up my energy. And because they don't have energy. And it's very, very difficult to make that connection because you have to be so precise and so subtle. And so it's easier to take energy from another human being or a dog or a cat or whatever. They're more freely giving of their energy. But we don't want to do that to each other because it puts us into a relationship of karmic bondage, which puts us into a situation where there is suffering in the relationship. And we rather not have that. We want to have a relationship with people where it is a non-dependent, non-predatorial relationship, where you take your energy from another source and you share that energy, but you're not depriving the other being of their life force just because you're hungry. You know what I mean? So this is why it is necessary for us to find a way to get access, because that source of energy is unlimited. It is vast, but it does not operate in the material world. It is accessible to human beings who do operate in the material world. And the function of a yogi is somebody who's connected. The function of a yogi is to bring that energy and radiate it. And so this is what we are looking at, learning about, you see. So does this make sense to you? You might have some questions that we want to talk about later on in the evening session, but I think we can also say that the great religions of the world are based on some mystics being able to have a connection and sustain their people through that connection, but no explanation. And because they will have a mystical experience, but they will not be able to, they will describe it, but they won't be able to define it. And so it is said in theological circles that this energy is indefinable. That's how it is said. This is incomprehensible, indefinable, but it's there because we saw, we felt. And then you say, okay, but I want information. And so that is the only conscious source that can describe to us itself. And it's much easier for us to grasp it if we can separate ourselves from gender, color, race, culture, age, all of this, to really, really understand that our identity has nothing much to do with the vehicle that we occupy. Once we can grasp that, it's so much easier to grasp the other. As long as we're limited to gender, class, culture, race, etc., we can't get out of that. It's a limitation. So getting out of that limitation is a very key ingredient to be able to go to the next step. Because if you can experience yourself to be neither male nor female and non-material, even if only for a second, it's enough to be able to know that this is so. I am not this body. And it's enough to be able to say, yeah, if I am like that, then that can also be like that. And I can make contact. See? And you cannot make contact physically. You can only make contact by your power of concentration, which means mathematically, by your soul. As soon as you focus yourself on yourself, independent of your body, you are in that dimension where that is. That is why you can make contact. So the important practice, we call it soul consciousness. To be conscious of yourself as a soul and to come out of the body by your will, by your understanding, and go into that dimension, which also is called nirvana. And because when you're on the same plane, you can make contact because there's nothing else is there except that. So you go there. But it's very subtle. It's like a wire to make contact with another wire so electricity can pass through. Because when an electrical instrument is having current, you call it live. And this is because this thing called light is like that. It's a current of energy which passes into you and which you can detect and which lights you up. But it's so subtle that it's quite difficult to make that contact. But the word yoga means that, making contact with that. And the part that requires the maximum work is the part of making oneself independent of one's body while still being in the body. So in your mind, in your understanding, you affirm, I am not this body. Knowing as much as possible about not being the body is enough to shift you off. This is why in the meditation in the first day, I think, I was telling you, okay, leave your body, go up above it. So in your imagination you can do that. It's very easy. Float above your body in the form of a light. Okay, yeah, I can do that. When you get it refined enough, it'll be enough so that you'll be able to hold it for a longer time. Sometimes people are afraid of leaving their body because they think, well, will I be able to come back, This is why it's something that you do in your mind. The amount of detachment from your body depends on your comfort level and your concentration and your subtlety, and also as you become more pure. They say in Christianity, for this crucifixion of Jesus, right? They say that he had overcome sin and death, right? You know this expression. But this is exactly what you are doing. Going outside of the limitation of death, outside of the bondage of sin. So there's this bondage of soul and body. You can't, because you're bound. This is why the attention on purity is helpful, because it unbinds you, slowly unbinds you and releases you from the bondage of the body and the fear of leaving your body, because you no longer identify with that I am this or that woman or this or that man, and I am the mother of, father of, child of. This is your identity. So having a different sense of identity is very helpful in letting go of all this. When a person is going to leave their body, we all are eventually, sooner or later, but you do it, you prepare yourself by, I am not this body, this is a shell. And your relationship with it changes, and your relationship with that changes, your relationship with this changes. This third eye point is said to be the seat of the soul in the body. From here you function. And just like you can get out of your car when you park it, it's normal. In the same way, this is your vehicle. You come out of it and you are free. But people are afraid of it because of the subconscious. And the subconscious is where your sins live. You don't want to deal with them. So slowly. So I'm telling you all of this just to give you like a context. And now we will practice this stream of thoughts that describe a way of saying, okay, this, I am now going to, in my mind, step out of my body, be myself, step into this dimension of light called nirvana. Nirvana means the place where there is no sound, not even the sound of a thought. So it's that much quiet. And that's scary. So slowly do it. Very slowly, little by little, better. And then you go far. Of course there's no distance there, but still we're used to distance, so you go far. Actually you don't go far, you just go to a different dimension. And that is there. So you open yourself to that, connect that, allow that to come to you, and invoke that energy to come to you and let it pass through you. And this is a very good way to grasp that beyond what we're used to. So that is a big energy. Think of yourself as this light in the center of the forehead. Consider your skeleton, your bones, your skull. You're the life force in this body. Because of you, it is alive. You have so much power to make this body move. All aspects of physical life of your body are functioning because you are there in this body. And every night when you go to sleep, anyway, you disconnect from your body naturally. Sleep is called the little death. Go beyond into silence and restore yourself spiritually and physically. Let us sleep. Now, consciously, in your mind. Draw the energy of your being from the extremities of your body. Bring all your energy to the point in the middle of the forehead that is the seat of the soul. And just be there. When you do this, bring yourself to a different dimension. Dimension of light. You allow yourself to rise up from your body gently. Your body sitting there on the chair. It's fine. And you have become just pure consciousness. Infinitesimally small being of light. That contains everything that is you. Let yourself rise up, floating above the body. And you enter a world of light so easily. Beautiful, golden, shimmering white light. Quiet, silent space, a space for your being. You sense vibrations. You can feel energy in that space. Beautiful, powerful energy that nurtures you. You feel loved. You feel deeply happy. Feel free. You have a sense of the source of that energy. There is a light. From where waves of light come to you. And rays of energy reach you. You're immersed in those rays and those waves. Let it enter your being, fill you with light. You feel empowered by this light, nurtured, strengthened. You are in perfect resonance with this energy. You let yourself be filled. Taking it in deeply. Holding steady while it fills you. This light knows you, recognizes you, loves you, and fills you with strength, with purity, sweetness. You are connected. There is a clear ray of light between your light and that light. And a strong energy flows through that ray. You are very still and quiet, and the energy flows and flows. You're focused, no distractions. You're beyond comfortable in that space, as if you have come home. As if you belong in that light. And waves of love carry you to an ever more subtle state of being. Until you feel complete. And very gently that ray of light releases you you release it and you gently, quietly reconnect with your body. Feel the energy coursing through your body, filling every cell with light, with quiet, with energy. And you are once again in the everyday world. Once again connected with your vehicle. Once again ready to come into action through the body. So you went for a flight and you came back. You went to drink the light, come back, nourished. So this is yoga.